It is week number 2, Sharpening the Edge. Along with Lucas Reimink from the Maize and Blue Review, I am Dennis Fithian. Lucas, good to see you. You ready to pick some games?
Yeah, absolutely. It's 2-3 last week, unfortunately, so not a great start. Learned a lot. Just want to go through a couple of quick takeaways here from some of the ones I lost. The under 54.5, Miami and Florida. Miami just kind of exploded there on offense. Thought Florida's defense was going to be better than that, but they were quite bad. So part of me just kind of wonders if they just quit on Billy Napier down there partway through that game, or what's going on there. I'm not completely sure, but they were really bad on defense. Texas A&M, that one was just wrong from the jump. Notre Dame just looked better than I expected. And then Penn State, I had 8.5. That was a pretty easy win. They took care of business, kind of like I thought they would. They're quietly one of the better teams in the country, in my opinion. I've seen them kind of power rated in the 5th or 6th spot in the country. So it's probably higher than most people think. But they're right now, they have some of the projections I've looked at have them as like 2-point dog to the Buckeyes on a neutral field, which is it's pretty close. And then they'd be like 6-point favorite over Oregon. So early in the season there, obviously to bet any of that, but it is just kind of something I'm going to monitor as the season goes on.
What we do, for those that might be just joining us for the first time, is we make 6 picks each week. We will pick the local teams, Michigan State, and the Lions, who are in action, and then we will have 3 games of the week, our favorites, our locks, whatever you want to call them. And I, like Lucas, also went 2-3. And if I had to say something about my picks here, I'm quitting on Billy Napier. I am like Billy Napier, saying that it was a complete embarrassment. I agree with him. And that was so painful. I knew that I had the wrong side within 5 minutes of watching Miami. Miami was clearly the better team. Florida was lucky to they got that one long run. But, man, the Canes are so much better than Florida, and things aren't going to get any better for Florida. Napier might be gone mid-season. The way you don't come out and have your team play like that, how they did against Miami. What a complete embarrassment. And with that, we get into our selections of the week, and we'll start with Michigan, who handled Fresno State by 21, right there on the number, right? So 20-21, how it ended up coming down. This time around, Michigan's getting 7 or 7.5 against Texas. It's the game of the century. Certainly it's the game of the year as we get into week 2. Lucas, how do you see it? Michigan and Texas, 7 or 7.5, whatever you want to use.
Yeah, unfortunately, Texas to cover is the pick for me officially here. Might be a bit of an overreaction from last week. I'll just admit that right off the bat. But I was quite concerned with what I saw from Michigan's offense. To win this game, I think Michigan will need to get into like the upper 20s, and I'm just not sure they're going to be able to do that against a Texas team who might not have a great defense, but I do think it's still an above-average defense. I think this Texas team is beatable. Their offense is elite, but without Devondre Sweat and Byron Murphy in the middle of that Texas defense, I think they're a lot more gettable this year on defense than they were last year. They still have some weaknesses in the secondary there, but like Michigan on the other side, they look like they can hardly throw the ball. So it's not really like, I think it's going to be an issue for Texas at some point down the road is the defense. But I'm not sure Michigan's equipped well enough to take advantage of that. Texas' offense on the other side, they're very RPO paced. So I think that'll kind of like free up some of the receivers and running backs and tight ends kind of in the short and intermediate parts of the field. And then Sark also likes to take a bunch of shots as well. He's really going to test Michigan's secondary. The wide receiver room for the Longhorns is elite. It's one of the best in the country. I think Michigan's going to struggle to cover all of them, even if Will Johnson personally has a good game. I still think that could be an issue for Michigan covering the Texas wide receiver room as a whole. Don't really love Quinn Ewers as a quarterback, but I think he's good. He's got elite weapons around him. And on paper, the offensive line is really good. They didn't play that well last week in their first matchup. So that's something I'll definitely be watching early on in the game as well, as how Michigan's defensive lines kind of fare against Texas's offensive line. Anyways, like just kind of boil it down. It really comes down to the matchups to me for this game. I just think Texas is a bad matchup for a Michigan team right now that's still kind of finding their footing after everything they lost from last season. Not completely selling all of my Michigan stock, but to me, it's going to look more like a 9-3, 8-4 type season for the Wolverines, unless that offensive line really turns around and gets it going partway through the season. So I have Texas winning the game here, 27-16.
27-16. I hear where you're coming from when it comes down to this game, and I look at it much like you do. Quinn Ewers, it wasn't as impressive. It was impressive winning in Tuscaloosa at Alabama last year. Some big game experience for the Longhorns, but the year before is where I was most impressed with Ewers. The game that against Alabama at home where he hurt his shoulder, they were going to beat the Crimson Tide. They were on their way, and he was on the money. They certainly don't have Xavier Worthy, but they get Bond from Alabama and the two other guys that they picked up in the wide receiver in the portal. Those guys are speed burners. I don't think they're Xavier Worthy type speed, but those guys are pretty fast. And, you mentioned that Texas offensive line, they got over 100 starts. That's a pretty good experience. And I also think when you get to where Texas did last year on the national stage in the college football playoff, and then you lose, we know what it was like for Michigan going all that way and the celebration and everything else. Texas has been mulling this one over and thinking about a national championship all summer long, and they've been pointing to this game. I also think that is an advantage for them as well, and that's why I have picked the Horns 23-16. Now, I'm going to take Michigan to cover. So I had that originally at 7.5. It's if it's 7, whatever. Maybe I'd bump it up a little bit. I'm not trying to hit an exacto here, but I'll take the 7.5 with Michigan, although I know that it has dropped to 7. That's the way I see that. Now, we go to Michigan State. Michigan State, they didn't look all that great last week. Meanwhile, Maryland looks like they've got a quarterback. They can throw it around a little bit. I think Maryland handles Michigan State pretty easily. I'll lay that. I think it's an 8-point. The spread, I'll take the Terps. I think State will be up against it here. I'll take the Turtle, 35, Michigan State, 16. How do you see that game?
I'm with you on this one. I'm taking Maryland to cover that spread as well. I saw it at 9.5, depending on what book. Watched a little bit of the Michigan State game last week. I was not very impressed with Aiden Childs. He's still pretty inconsistent, way too inconsistent to be considered a reliable passer, in my opinion. He does make a couple wild throws that are really impressive, but they're kind of few and far between, at least at this point in his development. I do think Michigan State's defensive front seven is the strength of their team, but Michigan State's secondary still look plenty gettable. Don't think they've really solved that problem. They've had that problem for like 3 or 4 years now. I didn't see anything from that game that made me think that they've solved that in any way. Maryland, on the other side, they pulled a little bit of surprise. They started Billy Edwards at quarterback. A lot of people thought it would be NC State transfer MJ Morris. And I only caught the highlights of that game, but he looked pretty good from what I saw. He went 20-27, 311 yards, 2 touchdowns. Get that it was against UConn, but I still think it was a pretty good performance for your first start. And it was a little bit of a surprise for him to be able to start as well. At home here for Maryland, I don't think it's like a great home field environment or anything, but I still like the Terps here to cover at home, given kind of like the strength of their offense going against the vulnerable Michigan State secondary.
Yeah, and we also know that quarterback can get down in short yardage and get some of those tough yards. What do you have, 3-4 touchdowns against Michigan last year, if I recall. All right, so we both have Michigan State, and we both think Michigan's going to drop that game to Texas. Let's see if we agree on the Lions. Last week, if you missed it, both Lucas and I picked the Lions to go to the Super Bowl and win it. Now they'll take on Matt Stafford 2.0. This was the playoff game last year that the Lions won by 1. And so in this game, you have to give up 3.5 points in Sunday Night Football as the Lions start the season out that everyone hopes ends with a championship. Lucas, how do you think they're going to start this season out? -3.5 against the Rams.
Yeah, so I think that spread there, 3.5, is about perfect, in honest opinion. So I'm going to attack the total here. I would go over 52.5. I think the Lions are going to win the game, but the secondary and the linebackers are still a bit of a concern for me. A lot of new faces in the secondary, but they still have to get a lot better. And I haven't seen it from them this year, so I don't know if you can trust all the new faces and all the new places in the first game of the year. I do expect them to get better as the season goes on because they got a couple rookies that'll be playing. Kirby Joseph hasn't been in the league that long. And kind of like looking at the Rams, Aaron Donald obviously no longer plays for them. No one else on that defense really scares you. Matt Stafford obviously headlines a really good Rams offense. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua to throw to, Kyron Williams to hand it off to. I think they're going to be a really good offense. And then the Lions obviously have one of the best offenses in the league as well. And I'm kind of buying the Rams as a whole. I think they're going to have a good year, kind of a bounce back year. I don't love either side of the spread, but I do like that over 52.5. So that's what I'm going to go with here.
Yeah, I like when I'm picking a game. This one I wouldn't encourage people to go out and bet because I think this one's coming down to the end. Could be a kick. It's going to be a very tight game. And I'm picking the Rams, and I'm taking them in the 3.5 points. Hope the Lions win the game. But I like when teams, when they lose in the playoffs and they come back and they have to play. Now, it didn't work last night. The Ravens, would have said the same thing. I'll take the Ravens here. They lost in the AFC Championship game to the Chiefs. They came within an inch of tying it up there on the last play of the game, but it didn't happen. But that's why I like the Rams here, the motivation of going back to Detroit. They lost by 1. I think they can keep it within, if not winning it outright, I think they will take those 3.5 points. So I will take the Rams in this one with all those offensive players, including possibly Blake Corum. Getting a little burn, right? Isn't that the team he's playing for? So we'll see if old Blake comes back to the state of Michigan and has some success. But I'll take the Rams -3.5. All right, that gets us into our plays of the week, our 3 favorite picks if we were playing the menu. And I'll start us out here. I'm going to a game that is going to feature a transfer quarterback in Kyle McCord, Syracuse. McCord, man, he looked like he was on point last week, throwing the ball around. Syracuse is at home, and they're getting 3 points against Georgia Tech. They're going to have to stop that run, but the Yellow Jackets are going to have to stop that pass. And I'm going to take McCord and the Orange, and I think they'll win it outright, but I'll gladly take the 3 points. Syracuse +3 against Georgia Tech. What's your first pick?
I'm going to take Tennessee -9.5. They're going on the road to NC State. Nico, I don't even try and say his last name because it is very hard to pronounce, but he is a stud. Preseason, I bet him and Cam Ward to win the Heisman or my 2 picks. They both look really good after week 1, so I'm liking those picks. Nico, he's got an elite arm, very good arm strength. He's got great ball placement. He's very athletic. Kind of like side tangent, he was also like a 5-star recruit in men's volleyball. So he's a highly talented, highly athletic individual. He's like 6'5" and got a cannon. He's a very good player. And then they also kind of found a star running back that it looked like it was going to be a platoon situation, but Dylan Sampson kind of took over the job in week 1, had 3 touchdowns for them on the ground last week to kind of complement Nico in that great passing attack. And then Tennessee's wide receiver room is one of the top 10 in the country as well. Brew McCoy has been there for a while. They still got Squirrel White. They got a lot of weapons to throw the ball there, too. And, oh, yeah, by the way, they also have a possible #1 overall pick on the defensive side in James Pierce Jr., who is one of the best edge rushers in the country, going to go very highly in the NFL draft. So I really like this Tennessee team. So even though it's going on the road early in the year, it's only Nico's second start at NC State. But I think they're going to get this win by at least 10 points. I got them winning 35-21.
Well, let me jump right in because I am also taking Tennessee. I had it -10 at NC State, 9.5. Maybe I'll have to shop around. And you mentioned Nico Iamaleava. I've practiced it a little bit. There's times when you just watch a guy throw the football and you hear people say, "Man, you ever see the ball come out of his hand?" the way that he throws the ball and it just shoots out of his arm like he's got like that Iron Man kind of like one of those guns on there, and he's just firing it. It looks so good. I'm so impressed with Iama Leava that I am also on the Vols bandwagon, and I'm going to lay the 9.5, 10 points just like you. Let's get a second selection in one of your picks of the week, as we finally agreed on one here, which is nice. And where do you go for your second lock of the week?
Yeah, that is nice. Makes me feel even better about it. I'm going my second one here. I'm going to take Illinois at home plus 5.5 against Kansas. I saw this a graphic, so I wanted to look it up, see for myself. But Illinois' offensive line, heights and weights. I'm going to go starting on the left tackle to the right side. 6'5", 320, 6'5", 325, 6'2", 290 is the center. He's the smallest one. 6'6", 335, 6'4", 315. So they have a big offensive line. They are a powerful group there, and a lot of experience in that room as well. I think they're going to be able to run the ball almost at will against Kansas's D-line that's a little bit undersized. They only have one defensive tackle that's over 300 pounds on their starting defensive line. Both of their defensive ends are like 250-pound range. So I think they're going to be fighting a little bit of an uphill battle there against that huge Illinois offensive line. The quarterback for Illinois, Luke Altmaier, transferred in from Ole Miss prior to last season. Had kind of an okay year for them last year, but he returns for the season. He's got more experience now. It's in his second year in the system. He's also got some mobility. It was a tune-up game last week, but he looked pretty good. He went 19 for 24, 213 yards, 4 touchdowns. Kind of buying into Illinois' offense this year. Jalen Daniels at their side for Kansas. He's really good, but I talked about it a little bit last week. They lost their OC to Penn State this offseason. I think that matters. I think he's a really good coordinator, so I do downgrade Kansas's offense a touch from what it was last year. The Jayhawks going on the road here, playing in Champaign. I think Illinois covers this and may even win the game outright, so I'll gladly take that plus 5.5.
I like that pick and all that beef on the offensive line. You also forgot the head coach, Brett Bielema, 6 feet, 352 pounds for the head coach. Now, look, I'm one to be joking about somebody's weight, but come on. And 352 for the head coach, you got to watch out when you're coming at you with that offensive line. So he's right there down there in the trenches with him. I like that pick of Illinois against Kansas. Now, this is a wild pick because I picked against Iowa last week as I give my third lock of the week, but I was impressed by their offense, able to put up some points. I'm sure all the Hawkeye fans, they scored more points in game one than they did all year long, but they're playing their rivalry game against Iowa State, and they're at home. They've handled Iowa State 7 of the last 8 times, and it's just -3. I like the Hawkeyes here. Was rooting against them last week, but now here I am on the Hawkeye bandwagon. That could be dangerous when you're chasing last week's performance, but I think they've got an excellent defense. They get a little bit of offense, and they've been good against Iowa State anyways. The battle, what do they call it? The
Cy Trophy?
Yeah, there it is. It's going back to Iowa City. And I'll take the Hawkeyes here. I'll lay the 3 points in that one. So we go back to Lucas for his third pick of the lock of the weeks.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one in spirit. That was literally the last one I cut off my short list to be able to include it in the show. So I'm with you on spirit. I was on the same side as you there. I just didn't quite make my best bets. It was the one I chopped off at the very end. But for my last pick, I'm going to go over 55.5 here, Colorado and Nebraska. Colorado, in my opinion, hasn't really changed much from last season. Pretty much just Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, and not a whole bunch else. The defense is still really bad, but their offense is going to be able to score. They have 2 elite-level players on it. Jimmy Horn Jr. on the other side of Travis Hunter at receiver is also really good, so you can't even double-team Travis because then Horn can just beat you on the other side. Then Nebraska, new quarterback, 5-star Dylan Raiola. I thought he looked pretty good for Nebraska last week. I get that it was UTEP, but I think that's the best quarterback they've had there in a while, despite him being a true freshman. Having a competent passing attack is just not something we've seen from Nebraska's offense in quite a few years. They snagged Isaiah Nair, the transfer portal from Texas. He's a good receiver for them. Started his career at Wyoming and then transferred to Texas and then transferred to Nebraska for this season. Led the charge for them at the receiving corps last week, having a big game. So I think he'll have another big game here. I think both teams will be able to put up points, and I'm pretty sure. I'm quite sure Colorado is not going to be able to stop anybody, and I'm pretty sure Nebraska's defense got a little bit overrated, playing a lot of the backup quarterbacks that they faced in the Big Ten last year. So I'm just going to go over 55.5 there, Colorado, Nebraska game.
Yeah, I can see this game going over 80, to tell you the truth, watching how they're the two quarterbacks they have and the star power, and that's what everybody wants to see too. So I like that one. And for those that want to see it, up on the screen, here's Lucas's locks. Tennessee, -9.5, Illinois, +5.5, and the over, 55.5 with Colorado and Nebraska. I'm taking Syracuse plus the 3 points at home against Georgia Tech. I am taking Iowa to beat their in-state rival, Iowa State, laying 3 there. And we both agree, Tennessee at NC State. Nico Iamaleava. It'll be a household name before long. That's what happens when you got a guy like that. Nobody can say his name, but man, you watch him throw the football. After a while, everybody's going to be able to say it. Lucas, great job and good luck in week 2.
Yeah, we have a lot more agreement this week, so that's either a really good sign or a really scary sign. But it certainly feels good going into it knowing that we agree more this week, so I'll take that.
I will too. I'm right with you. For Lucas Reimink, I'm Dennis Fithian. Everybody, good luck in whatever games that you pick.